Now I'll give the floor to the Executive Director of EOS Network Foundation, Yves, to give us an introduction of the status quo and future vision of the foundation.
Thank you very much, Daisy. And hello, everybody. I thank you very much for coming today. I'm very pleased to be able to speak with you all today and give you an update on what the EOS Network Foundation has been doing over the last 2 months. Essentially, what we've been doing is repositioning and positioning EOS, the EOS ecosystem, towards the future, essentially rebuilding a vision that has largely been lost over the last couple of years. I think it's important to give you a little bit of context and background to address the current situation and to assess what went wrong over the last few years. But more importantly, how we plan on taking what we've learned so that we may move towards where we may want to be, so that EOS is more fruitful and more sustainable in terms of growth. There's no sugarcoating it. EOS, as it stands, is a failure. The last 3 years or so have been nothing but dwindling in terms of market cap and in terms of token value. EOS has been a terrible investment. It's been a terrible financial, time, and community investment. The reality is that many people no longer want to be associated with EOS because of its tarnished reputation. EOS, as it stands, is a failure. Since stepping down as CEO of EOS Nation, I had the opportunity to take a step back and reassess where we've been and how we got here. It's very clear to me that EOS was a victim of its own success. The token sale for EOS shattered and broke all previous records in terms of funds raised. This put EOS in a position of having to meet extreme expectations as it raised extreme sums. A large part of the token sale success can be attributed to the commitments that block.one made. At this point, it's the consensus of most token holders that I speak to, inside and outside of EOS, that block.one knowingly misrepresented their capabilities, and this amounts to negligence and fraud. EOS is now in a state where, regardless of what it does, it's weighed down by the failed commitments and the failures of block.one. It's apparent that block.one is pretending it can add value to EOS, and it dangles this pretense in order to quell any potential uprising. They've largely moved away from wanting to contribute, and their EOS is more of a liability than it is an asset. It's a liability on the legal front, on the media front, and it's liability in terms of overall finances. This is not to say that some internal to block.one aren't wishing to add value, but the machine is not focused on EOS in any meaningful sense. The shareholders of block.one are not the same as the EOS token holders, and we find ourselves in a position where we're weighed down by an entity that doesn't even want to be here. What we're experiencing is a shift whereby the EOS community is placing itself in a position to be able to move away from block.one, essentially forking them out. Until this formal shift occurs, block.one will simply continue weighing EOS down. To the greater blockchain ecosystem, EOS is block.one, block.one is fraudulent, therefore EOS is fraudulent. The reality for those within the ecosystem is that we have also reached consensus and agree with this assessment that they're fraudulent. block.one were negligent and overstated their capabilities. This break is needed for a narrative and branding shift to occur. So there's a clear delineation that EOS does not equal block.one. If they truly cared, they should welcome this approach as the next optimal play that should be done. If this is a chess game, they should agree that this is the best move for all. If the idea is to win as a team, this is the next move. Until then, all efforts that we do within the ecosystem are largely overshadowed by this weight that bears down on the ecosystem. They should recognize that there's another entity that's better suited to run these operations. When I decided to pursue the launch of the EOS Network Foundation back in August, I did so with the mindset that the EOS community needed to take matters in its own hands to move towards a future where EOS regains leadership within the greater blockchain ecosystem. The software itself is extremely performant, but very few people are aware of this, and EOS largely works within its own sandbox. EOS was quickly branded by its competitors as a centralized chain, and this worked very well for them, as it resulted in the network becoming further decentralized to a fault to counter the narrative that was being placed on it. The structures within EOS were chaotic due to true decentralization at an early stage. Our issue has not been decentralization, but the lack of centralization. A centralized entity that could support the ecosystem in a way that only a centralized entity could. Most other blockchains launched with a foundation. EOS is the only valued ecosystem that did not, but now has a foundation born out of decentralization. The EOS Network Foundation is a direct result of the holes and gapes that have been created over the last 3 years and is unique in this regard. This has tremendous potential. The creation of the EOS Network Foundation at this time enables EOS to be extremely efficient, focused, and resolved in its capital deployment and vision creation. To an extent, we're fortunate in EOS because we can learn from what others have done and others have come before us have done. When it comes to what is needed to lay the foundations for a thriving ecosystem, we have others to look towards and model off. We currently have funding and momentum that can be deployed to amplify and to accelerate these strengths. Over the past 2 months, the EOS Network Foundation has positioned itself administratively, legally, technically, and financially to be able to stop the bleeding that is occurring in the EOS ecosystem. It has positioned itself to help EOS start running in the right direction again, to catch up to the rest of the blockchain ecosystem that has largely left EOS behind. The EOS Network Foundation is empowered to execute on its mandate of enabling developers, businesses, and individuals to build on EOS. EOSIO is a very powerful piece of software that is battle-tested and extremely performant. Our issue is not lack of technology. Our issue is not lack of supply. The issue that we must address is the lack of demand, and part of this lack of demand comes from the branding that weighs us down. The EOS Network Foundation is now in a position to form strong partnerships with key opinion leaders and media partners such as yourselves to amplify the work that's being done daily by developers, businesses, and individuals within our ecosystem in order to help reposition and rebrand EOS as a blockchain environment of choice for investors. The EOS Network Foundation is serious in its resolve to attract investors. In the last 2 months, the EOS Network Foundation has been able to set the baseline for the EOS ecosystem to move it towards where it can redeploy and execute on a new vision and have a roadmap where stakeholders can see themselves within that vision. EOS has been lacking vision since the token sale. There's been no white paper, yellow paper, or overall published roadmap of any worth. When attracting developers, businesses, individuals, and investors, these are extremely important as it gives a sense of direction. It lays out how we plan on getting there and how stakeholders fit within that vision. More importantly, it opens the door for these stakeholders to contribute towards that vision. Without a vision and without a roadmap, it's extremely difficult for people to have hope for the future and want to join an ecosystem. All they can do is imagine for themselves what that vision may be, and we've seen that this is chaotic and leads to a downfall. The EOS Network Foundation takes this responsibility extremely seriously and has been engaging with key stakeholders to lay out this vision. As I mentioned earlier, we're fortunate to be able to have others within the greater blockchain ecosystem that have created a path for us to be able to model off. One of those entities that I admire is Consensus and Ethereum. The EOS Network Foundation is modeling some of its pillars on their products to have as public good pillars available to all. I call these pillars because they will support everything that's built on top of them. These pillars will lay out 4 blue papers that will in tandem form a very detailed and expansive component of the overall roadmap for EOS. I want to take the time to delve into a little bit more detail so you have a better understanding of what I mean when I mention pillars. We currently have 4 pillars, 4 working groups that are being formed and should be formally announced in the next coming weeks. They will lay the foundations for the technical roadmap for EOS. The final names of those working groups are still in draft, but they've been labeled as Audit Plus, Wallet Plus, Docu Plus, and API Plus in the interim. They are teams of individuals that have been appointed by the EOS Network Foundation. They are subject matter experts within their own realm that have been contributing to EOS and have showcased that they're capable of and are willing to do the work that is required of them to lead us forward. Each of the 4 working groups has been tasked with creating a blue paper over the next 8 to 12 weeks. What I call a blue paper is a blend of components that are traditionally found in a white paper, a yellow paper, a request for proposal, and a roadmap. The aim is to publish these 4 papers prior to the upcoming Chinese New Year. Another thing to note in terms of the roadmap is that we can no longer rely on block.one to support and guide development. They've lost all key developers and have pivoted away from being a blockchain development company towards being an asset management company. It's inevitable that the EOS Network Foundation will need to manage the EOSIO codebase going forward. However, we don't plan on doing so in a similar fashion to what block.one has been doing. They've been focusing on features required for their own products and operations, not ours. The problem with this is that whenever a feature or priority for EOS token holders doesn't align with theirs, the issue is never addressed. And as EOS token holders are not block.one shareholders, there's a misalignment of incentives. One of the ways that we've seen this manifest itself over the years is that no Chinese developers had the opportunity to get their PRs merged by block.one, despite Chinese developers being numerous and talented. The EOS Network Foundation is moving towards a model very similar to Ethereum, where there are multiple core development teams instead of one. The EOS Network Foundation will serve as the coordination and allocation of capital for the overall development function. We will incentivize multiple core developer teams to form and to bring about the changes to the code base that they believe are necessary for the EOS network. This will translate into further collaboration and the growth of the EOS family instead of the current segregation and working in silo. We see our role manifesting itself very similarly to what we see in other blockchains where foundations present the visions and roadmap. On top of this, the EOS Network Foundation would coordinate different merges of code and present the resulting recommendations to the block producers, so we have more consistent and more frequent updates. The priority was highlighted early and steps have already been taken towards this inevitable future. It's important to highlight and to recognize that we're running from behind. Over the last 3 years, EOS has squandered away a lot of the lead that it had prior to launch. When the EOS Network Foundation was launched, we understood very quickly that we didn't have the luxury to be able to operate vertically. What I mean by vertically is working on one project at a time, one after another. What we've chosen to do by necessity is to work horizontally, meaning that we're firing on all cylinders at once. We're working on multiple projects all at once, multiple priorities in tandem, in concurrence, in the same fashion that a multi-core, multi-threaded CPU operates. We're moving ahead at an extremely rapid pace. The advantage is to be able to deliver consistently and continuously. We're aware that when a project is undertaken, it may sometimes take months before tangible results are seen. Running on multiple fronts in parallel is what effective corporations do. And this is the approach that we're taking. It's important to note that the EOS Network Foundation is very much aiming to run the EOS network as a business. Regarding funding, we must continue supporting the rest of the ecosystem through funding as we've done over the last couple of weeks. For example, our $100,000 recognition grant initiative generated quantifiable positive results. Over $3 million worth of investments went and will go to teams within our ecosystem that have consistently demonstrated love for EOS. To add to this, the EOS Network Foundation contributed roughly $2 million to the development and the first iteration of Eden, which held its first election in October. I've been very satisfied with the results so far. I monitor closely and I see a lot of potential in this initiative. I'm excited to see China create its first Eden as well, and I already see many working towards this goal. I invite all of you to participate in the Chinese iteration of Eden. The EOS Network Foundation commits to financially supporting this initiative once it's in a state to accept funding. So far, the EOS Network Foundation has committed and deployed over $7 million directly back into EOS since its creation. We've already started to lay the foundations of funding mechanisms accessible to EOS community members. This is only the beginning as we formalize our grant framework that will lead us forward towards more frequent and larger investments. We've already been approached by venture capitalists looking to invest in EOS to the tunes of $150 to $200 million of extra capital. Think about that. EOS historically has had very poor branding and marketing. We've touched upon certain reasons this has been the case earlier in the discussion. Working on branding and marketing is something that we've highlighted as a top priority, and we've deployed considerable resources to early on. I'm very excited to share that the EOS Network Foundation has been working adamantly towards repairing the current narrative. EOS now has what is required to effectively market itself internally, but more importantly, externally by leveraging the EOS Network Foundation as a central point of communication. We are working with global marketing and branding firms to help us guide us and position EOS towards a better, brighter future. This work is crucial so that we've employed the best and brightest in the space so that EOS is supported by exceptional talent. Changing the narrative comes one day at a time. And I'm confident that looking back in a few months, we'll be able to see this work being reflected in token price sentiment. Speaking of which, what excites me the most is what I believe that there's a tremendous upside to the EOS token compared to other tokens. Those doing technical analysis seem to agree. EOS has not benefited from the rise in overall market size. The token itself has been lacking behind its peers in big part because of the narrative and branding. This presents a massive opportunity for those that are still in EOS and those that are looking to invest. Recognizing that there's a lot of work that's been done and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done until we turn around, and this will take some time. I'm working towards being able to create the conditions that are needed for this token to reach a tipping point once all the pieces fall into place. The opportunities for those that remain and those that invest in EOS at this time could be massive. I hope each and every one of you sees that there's a role that you can play. As I present myself publicly today, I stand with certainty. My purpose is clear and without doubt. As leader of the EOS Network Foundation, I will give and lead the community in fulfilling the limitless potential that EOS holds. My vision is bold, yes, and not without controversy. Every day, the EOS Network Foundation is winning hearts and minds, but I'm not here to win hearts. That is for others. My purpose is to fill the void of leadership. Future-facing, onward-looking, and opinionated I may be, but indecisive I am not. My leadership will make the EOS ecosystem thrive once more. But I alone cannot succeed in this task. Together, as a community, we can deliver an extraordinary revolution for EOS. I believed that in 2017, and I firmly believe it here today. Our actions have propelled and inspired a new wave of collectivism within the community. As I conclude my words, I leave you with this message. Today is the genesis of what EOS has the capacity to become. There are no more excuses. There are no more roadblocks. We have everything we need. What becomes of EOS next is simply what we make of it. Thank you.